So this happened almost a year ago, and I'm not sure I fully processed what happened. I got my own place at 22 and started a second job in the summer to help with costs. It was a newspaper route that ran 12 to 3 a.m. every day, and it was pretty simple and easy. 3 months into the job, and I was in a strict routine. Got to pick up location, bag newspaper, listened to music, and drove around dropping off newspapers at condos, apartments, and out my car window to houses. The same route every day. On this night, I couldn't sleep, and since I had more freedom to move my shift hours, I decided to head to work 15 minutes early. I'm not going to go into much detail of the location, but it was a public library, and I got there at 2 a.m. instead of 2:15 a.m. Pulling into the library, it was a huge parking lot and garage. Most of the lights were at the library entrance. Usually there was a security guard that patrolled, and once he knew I was the newspaper girl, we would just wave at each other. This is important. I was pulling into the front of the library, and I have to do a half U-turn to park. But I noticed down the street, there's another car doing a half U-turn as well. If you ever drive a lot at night, you know that headlights are a lot more noticeable, especially when nobody's on the road. That was my first gut instinct, and I tried to brush it off. So I watched in my side view for them to pull off, but instead, they stop and turn their lights off. It becomes a 30-second waiting game, while I felt too uncomfortable to get out and drop off the paper. Like a guardian angel, the security car turns the corner, facing both our cars. I take this as my opportunity to safely get out of the car and drop off the papers. But it was more like throwing them with how fast my heart was racing. As the paper hits the floor and I turn around, I see the security guard's car go into the parking garage. I hear tires screeching like it's taking off. Everything in my body tells me to run, so I sprint off the curb into my car and lock the door. I got to my car, I look into the rear view for the lights of the car, and I don't see them. So I look into my side mirror, and I don't see them. Then I look again into my rear view, and notice it's blacker than normal. So I straighten my posture to get a better look. The car was there, but it was so close behind me that I couldn't even see the headlights, or the color or anything. Just the black windshield. I immediately step on it, flying past 2 stop signs and going into a gated community, which is my next delivery location, to process what had just happened. I ended up quitting less than a week afterwards, because I couldn't relax on the route anymore. But I always wonder if I just overreacted, or if someone was actually planning on trying something. Edit: I forgot to mention that the route paid by the paper, and if I missed a delivery, I didn't get paid. The next night when I got to work, my manager let me know that the library reported that they never got the papers that night. A few years ago, I volunteered for a food drive hosted by a charity that operated out of a church basement. Me and the other volunteers unpacked canned goods and sorted them into boxes, so it was pretty simple work. There was a retired teacher named Donna who ran everything. I'd been volunteering there for about 3 months, mostly because a coworker told me it was a good way to spend a Saturday, and she was right. Then a guy named Aaron showed up one week. He introduced himself to everyone, including Donna, and he remembered all of her names by the end of the morning. That was the first thing I noticed about him. He had that kind of confidence that made me feel comfortable. He asked Donna questions about where the donations went and how the charity was funded, and she seemed to appreciate that he was engaged. Over the next few weeks, I got used to seeing him there. He always arrived on time, did his share of the work without making a show of it, and he stayed to clean up. During breaks, he told me about his work, which involved coordinating deliveries for a supermarket chain. He said the charity work reminded him of what he did professionally, just with better reasons behind it. People laughed at that, and I laughed too. He was pleasant company, and he was reliable, which in a volunteer setting made him stand out. Donna started giving him extra responsibilities quickly. Within 3 weeks, she trusted him to manage the supply inventory, which meant he'd track what the charity had in storage and what needed to be ordered. The charity rented a storage unit about 2 minutes from the church. It was in one of those large outdoor facilities with rows of orange roll-up doors. Donna used it to hold overflow donations that couldn't fit in the church basement. There were things like bulk paper goods, bagged rice, and seasonal items. Volunteers made trips out there maybe twice a month. Then one day, Aaron offered to drive a load of extra donations to the unit. There were 6 or 7 boxes of stuff, and a few bags of winter clothes that someone dropped off. It was a lot for one person, so he asked if anyone could come along to help. Most people already left for the day, so I said I could go. We loaded the boxes into the back of his truck. It was a clean gray pickup, and I think it was a Chevrolet. The drive was fine, and we just chatted normally. Then we pulled into the storage space just before noon. Most of the units were closed, and there was hardly another person in sight. Aaron put in the code at the gate and drove slowly down the center lane until he stopped in front of our unit. It was about 10 by 15 feet with a concrete floor and metal shelving along the back wall. Donna kept it organized, and each shelf had a label. We started unloading the truck right away. I carried the clothing bags inside first and set them near the shelves. Then Aaron brought in 2 boxes and put them down near the door. I was sorting things onto the correct shelves when I heard the metal door roll down behind me. The sound was loud and it echoed a lot in there. I turned around and Aaron was crouched beside the door, feeding the latch into the track. He stood up and didn't explain anything. It was a little cold that day, so I thought he did it to keep the wind out. However, we were only going to be in there for a minute, so that didn't fully make sense. I looked over at him, and he didn't say anything for a moment. Then he went between me and the door, not pressed against it, but he was blocking the latch, and there was about 8 feet between us. Then he started asking me questions. He asked how long I'd been in my current relationship. I told him because I was trying to keep it casual. He asked whether things were going well, and I said yes. Then he asked if I ever cheated on anyone. I laughed, a little, and said there was a strange question, but he didn't laugh. He said he was just curious how people handled things. I said I didn't really know what he meant, and looked back at the shelves. Then he stepped closer, not aggressively, but given the circumstances, it was scary. The door behind him was the only exit, and the latch was a pull cord at waist height that required getting close. Then he asked another weird question. It was something like whether I thought people were naturally loyal, or whether situations just got complicated. I said I thought it depended on the person, which was just an attempt to dodge the question. But really, the point is that it was a tense and awkward conversation, and it felt like he wasn't letting me leave. I was still trying to pretend that everything was fine, though, so I tried to go for the door. I was hoping he'd move out of the way, but he just stood there and put his hands up like he was going to grab me. I jumped back and looked at him. There was an expression in his eyes that terrified me, and at that moment, I knew he was going to do something. I said that I wanted to leave, but he just stood there stone-faced. Then he started walking towards me as I backed into the far corner of the room, with about 8 feet between us. I said that my friend Clara had my location, and I was supposed to check in, but none of it was true. Clara was a lady from the charity who I exchanged maybe 20 words with, and I hadn't told anyone where I was going that morning. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone without breaking eye contact with him. He stopped walking and stared at me for a long time. Then something in his expression changed, and he stepped to the side. I walked around him to the door at a normal pace, pulled the latch and rolled it up. The cold air came in, and I stepped out into the lane and kept moving towards the truck. He followed a few seconds later and said something about finishing the unloading. I said I wasn't feeling well and I needed to head back. He tried to pretend like that last 10 minutes hadn't happened and started unloading the rest of the boxes himself. I walked to the front entrance and called an Uber. Then I went home. Then I called Donna and told her what had happened. She said she understood and that she'd handle it. Aaron didn't appear the following Saturday, and he wasn't there the Saturday after that. Donna told me she spoke with a volunteer coordinator and that Aaron's access to the charity accounts, keys, and storage codes had been removed. She didn't tell me the details of the conversation she had with him, and I didn't ask. When this happened, I was working the front desk at a medical supply company. My job was straightforward. I answered phones, checked in orders, and handed paperwork to the reps who came in and out all day. It wasn't exciting, but I liked having a routine, and my coworkers were easy to get along with. I'd been there for about 6 months when a guy named Sean started in the shipping department. He was maybe 30 years old, average height, with dark hair, and he seemed really nice at first. He introduced himself to everyone on his first day, which not many people did. Most new people kept their heads down for a few weeks before opening up. Sean wasn't like that. He shook hands with everyone and stopped at my desk to talk. Nothing serious. He just asked how long I'd worked there and other small talk type stuff. We started eating lunch together a couple of times a week. It was convenient since we both took our breaks at around noon. He was a good listener, and we had some good conversations. It was starting to seem like we were actually becoming friends. I got out of a relationship about a year before Sean started. My ex was a guy named Ted, and he didn't handle the breakup well. He sent me a lot of messages, showed up at places he knew I'd be, and called from different numbers when I blocked him. I mentioned this to Sean one afternoon, over lunch, because Ted texted me that morning, and I was still rattled. Sean's expression got serious, and he said that wasn't okay. Then he asked if I told anyone else. I said I told my friend Candace, and that was about it. He told me I should document everything, and said I could call him anytime if I felt unsafe. He seemed genuinely concerned, and I appreciated it, so we exchanged numbers that day. After that, things were pretty much fine for the next few weeks, and Ted seemed to back off. My apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building about 15 minutes from the office. It had 2 big windows that faced the parking lot, and it was just barely big enough for a single person. I lived there for almost 2 years. I knew my neighbors pretty well. Then one night, I got a call at around 10. I was already in bed when my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize, so I let it go to a voicemail. There was no message though. The same number called again 20 minutes later, and I answered because I was curious. A man's voice said he liked what I wore to work that day, then hung up before I could respond. Not that I was going to. I sat up and turned on the light and thought about Ted immediately. He drove past my building before, and it wasn't hard to imagine him sitting in his car watching me walk to and from work. I blocked the number and texted my friend Candace. She told me to save the number somewhere. Before blocking it, but it was too late for that one. I was pretty sure it was my ex-boyfriend Ted, but the voice didn't really sound like his. Not only that, but he'd been gone for a while, and he never did anything like that before. For all his faults, it really didn't seem like his style. Then I got a similar call every few nights. It always came late, and always from different numbers. He'd always comment on something I wore that day, and it was always specific enough to be creepy. I still thought it had to be Ted, because I couldn't think of who else it would be, but that would have meant that he was following me around and stalking me, so I was getting nervous. I mentioned the calls to Sean the following week at lunch. He looked worried and said I needed to be more careful, that I shouldn't walk to my car alone at night. He offered to walk me out after our shifts ended, and I told him I'd think about it. At the time, the offer seemed thoughtful. I did start being more cautious. I checked the parking lot before leaving the building, and I asked my neighbor Carl if he noticed anyone hanging around outside. He said he hadn't seen anything weird. From then on, I saved every number the caller used in a note on my phone. Just strings of digits labeled by date, and I kept the voicemails when he left them. However, most of the time he didn't. Then one night, about 3 weeks after it started, I got one of those calls, and he told me to look outside. I walked to the window slowly and pulled back the curtains just enough to see the parking lot. A figure stood near my car with his hands at his sides. I couldn't make out his face. From the heightened distance, though, I put the curtains back and stepped away from the window. Then I turned off the lights in the living room, so he couldn't see me. I checked the locks on my door. Then, after about an hour, I looked again, and the lot was empty. I called in sick the next morning, and sat at my kitchen table trying to decide what to do. I still believed it was Ted because he'd been volatile since we broke up, and he knew where I lived. I drafted a text to him saying I knew what he was doing, and that I'd go to the police. But I didn't send it because I wasn't certain enough, and I didn't want to make things worse if I was wrong. Then one day, the next week, I left work at 5:15 and walked the 2 blocks to my building. When I was almost there, a man came across the side of the building, wearing a ski mask pulled down over his face. He was coming right for me, so I turned and ran back towards the street and into the lobby of dry cleaners on the corner. The woman at the counter came out from behind the register and asked if I was okay. I told her someone followed me. She let me stand there for 20 minutes while I called for a ride. When I looked through the window again, the man was gone. That night, I finally called the police. It held off because I kept telling myself the situation would resolve on its own, which I know was irrational. I gave the officer the list of numbers I saved, and he said they'd look into it. I asked how long it would take, and he said he couldn't be sure, but this tracing disposable numbers took a few days. The police called me on the next Sunday morning. He said one of the numbers I provided wasn't a disposable phone. It was a registered line, and they traced it to a man named Sean Calloway. He asked if I knew the name, and I said yes. I told the officer where Sean worked, then I considered him a friend. The officer said they'd bring him in for questioning, and that I should avoid contact in the meantime. I said that wouldn't be a problem. I didn't go into the office on Monday. I called in and gave a vague excuse to my manager, Linda, who said she hoped I feel better soon. By Monday afternoon, the detective assigned to my case called to say Sean had been brought into for questioning, and he admitted to making the calls. He told them he started following me after work a few weeks into our relationship. He said he wanted me to feel unsafe, so I turned to him for help, and that he planned to be the person who made me feel protected. The detective used the word calculated when describing how Sean laid it out in the interview room. He said Sean showed no remorse and seemed more confused than guilty, as though he generally thought his plan was reasonable. Sean was charged with criminal harassment and released on bail pending a hearing. The detective told me about the process and what to expect. I put in my notice at work the following week. I didn't want to spend time in a building where people knew Sean. even though he wasn't coming back. I guess I was just worried that I'd have to explain what happened, or maybe I'd hear people talking. By the next month, I found a new job and I moved a few months after that. It's been over a year now and I haven't heard from Sean or Ted. I'd be lying if I said I was over it now, because whenever my phone rings, I get a little scared. You really never know who you're talking with. I really hope you enjoyed those stories, and if you did, please leave a like, comment, or subscribe. It really helps the channel. And if you have a story you want me to read, my Reddit link is in the description. I would love to read it. With that said, thank you all for listening, and as always, stay tuned.